Thanks a lot for inviting me. Thanks, Maggie, also for underlining this extremely important point that I'll come back to in fact. So, my name is Charles Heller. I'm from Forensic Oceanography in London and based as well in Geneva. And through my work as a researcher, I've also contributed to found Watch the Med and the Alarm Phone, and have been in regular dialogue with search and rescue NGOs over the last year. And let me first state the tremendous respect and admiration I have for all the unbelievable citizens who have bravely taken to the sea to act in solidarity with migrants and make up for the lethal rescue gap that states left in the wake of the ending of the Mare Nostrum operation. My admiration truly has no bounds, and I am humbled every time I am surrounded by them. Let me underline as well how horrified I was when I saw, as of autumn-winter 2016, the campaign that began targeting rescue NGOs. I was horrified because just a year actually before, I had written a report on the ending of the Mare Nostrum operation, an operation launched by Italy in 2013, which had deployed rescue means very close to the Libyan coast. Soon, however, it was accused of being a pull factor, delegitimized by state leaders, Frontex, which led to its termination at the end of 2014. However, the ending of the Mare Nostrum operation did not deter migrants from crossing as policymakers had hoped, but only led to a staggering increase in the number of deaths at sea, in particular in the April 2000 shipwrecks, which led to 1,200 deaths in 2 shipwrecks that occurred in less than a week. And this led to a staggering increase in the number of deaths and the mortality rate. By the way, the screens here are quite small, and I'm sure it's difficult to see, but all of these slides are available in our different reports. This is from the report, Death by Rescue. And so, when rescue NGOs in turn began to be targeted by a campaign of delegitimization and criminalization that echoed very much that would have been used against Mare Nostrum, I knew that this meant a looming catastrophe. Now, one major difference between the targeting of Mare Nostrum and rescue NGOs is that this time the aim is not only to limit and expel rescue activities from the sea so as to deter migrants from crossing, but also to make room for externalized border control through the Libyan Coast Guard, and to allow violations and violence to be perpetrated with impunity. And I really think we need to see criminalization of rescue and the policy of externalization of border control through the Libyan Coast Guard essentially as the two sides of the same coin. This is perfectly logical when you think about it. If Italy and the EU wants the Libyan Coast Guard to intercept and bring back migrants to Libya, they can't have European NGOs present off the coast of Libya rescuing and bringing back those migrants to Italy. Conversely, if they want to be able to operate with impunity, exactly as Ricardo has underlined, they cannot have the civilian gaze of non-governmental actors at sea. And since we see a strong complementarity and very clearly targeted intent in this combined policy, which really is an operation to close off the sea, we have called it Mare Clausum, right? It did not have a name, so we gave it a name. And it is the second dimension, the externalization of border control through the Libyan Coast Guard, that I would like to go deeper into here. Describing in particular the Sea-Watch versus Libyan Coast Guard case, on which we have produced a report titled Mare Clausum, and this report was the basis for a legal case filed by Glan and Asti in the name of the survivors, and led by extraordinary lawyers and legal experts, Itamar Mann and Violeta Morello-Lax, who are present right here. Now, I wanted to show you a brief video excerpt here, which, however, cannot play easily. And so I will simply describe this event, but we have produced with forensic architecture a video reconstruction of the event, relying as well, of course, on the tremendous amount of video material gathered by Sea-Watch through its different cameras. This incident occurred on the 6th of November 2017. During this incident, both Sea-Watch and the Libyan Coast Guard were informed of the presence of a boat in distress by the Italian Coast Guard and requested to direct themselves to rescue it. However, as they approached, the logics of interception and rescue came to a head. While the Libyan Coast Guard behaved recklessly and carelessly to intercept and bring the migrants back to Libya, Sea-Watch did everything it could to rescue passengers in distress, many of which had already fallen overboard. We see in the video reconstruction, the passengers preferred risking their life attempting to reach the Sea-Watch ribs, which you see in the image here, to the certainty of violence by the Libyan Coast Guard and in Libya thereafter. And this put Sea-Watch into a humanitarian dilemma. But without Sea-Watch's intervention, many of the passengers scattered in the water and left unattended by the Libyan Coast Guard would have drowned. Ultimately, Sea-Watch was able to rescue and bring to safety in Italy 59 passengers, but at least 20 people died before and during the events, while 47 passengers were pulled back to Libya, where several faced grave human rights violations, including being detained, beaten, and sold to another captor who tortured them to extract ransom from their families. Now, here we are at the heart of the way this conflictual event unfolded. However, we argue in our report that to really understand the circumstances that gave rise to this event and the responsibilities involved, it is necessary to understand the policies that shape the behavior of the actors and the patterns of practices within this event was inscribed. In short, we need to look at this event as the outcome of Italy and the EU's multiform collaboration with the Libyan Coast Guard to intercept and pull back migrants to Libya through political agreements, the provision of material, technical support, and coordination mechanisms. More concretely, I noted that the Italian Coast Guard informed both Sea-Watch and the Libyan Coast Guard. On the 10th of August 2017, the Libyan authorities in Tripoli, that is, in a fragmented and failed state, announced that they had unilaterally declared the Libyan search and rescue zone and threatened rescue NGOs that dared enter it. This declaration, which, after tribulations, was finally recognized in June this year, was one of the planned outcomes of an EU-funded project implemented by the Italian Coast Guard. While the Italian Coast Guard and the very project foresees that the Libyan Coast Guard's MRCC would be fully operational only by 2020, and despite the many issues that Ricardo mentioned, all Italian and European state actors have been acting as if this Libyan MRCC was already operational, so as to frame Libyan Coast Guard interceptions as operations of rescue. The very patrol boat, the Libyan Coast Guard, that engaged in reckless behavior in the Sea-Watch case and contributed to the deaths of several passengers, the Ras Jadir, was one of the 4 patrol boats that had been donated by Italy to the Libyan Coast Guard on the 15th of May 2017, in presence of the then Italian Minister of Interior, Marco Minniti. On board of that vessel on 6th of November, 8 out of the 13 Libyan Coast Guard crew members had received training from the EU's anti-smuggling operation UNAFOR Med, which has trained more than 188 Libyan Coast Guard personnel since autumn 2016. As we see in the video, during the events, the site was overflown by an Italian helicopter, part of the Mare Sicuro operation, which was deployed on the 2nd of August 2017 into Libyan territorial waters. Just in passing, that was the very same day that the Juventa vessel was seized, and this for us is a very important indication as well of how these two dimensions are intimately linked. The aim of this Italian operation has been to support the Libyan security forces in their activities against irregular migration and human smuggling by deploying aerial and naval means in supporting intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities. Within this frame, as Riccardo has also noted, the Italian Navy ships in Libyan port have offered a decisive contribution in terms of communication and coordination means. All these multiple forms of support and coordination have been deployed towards a single and clear objective: stemming illegal migration flows, as stated clearly in the Memorandum of Understanding signed between Italy and the Government of National Accord, GNA, in Libya on the 2nd of February 2017. This agreement between Italy and the Tripoli-based Libyan authorities received full EU Council support the very next day in the Malta Declaration adopted on the 3rd of February 2017. As a result of these policy agreements and multi-form supports and coordination, Italy and the EU essentially re-established a Libyan Coast Guard agency that had essentially vanished in the wake of the fall of the Gaddafi regime and the destruction of much of the means of intervention of the Libyan Coast Guards. Through these combined means, Italy and the EU have exercised strategic and operational control over the Libyan Coast Guard, which has operated as their proxy to intercept migrants, more than 20,000 in 2017 alone. By August 2017, the Libyan Coast Guard intercepted more migrants than anyone else rescued in the Mediterranean, with 39%. And the rate of interception by the Libyan Coast Guard has grown even further over the last months. And here, once again, you can't see this very well, but you see at the top a purple line, which is the contribution, the share of rescue by rescue NGOs, which was the top actor before summer 2017. And you see the orange line going up in parallel. Once again, an indication of how these two dimensions are deeply intertwined. Importantly, the higher rate of interception by the Libyan Coast Guard has been correlated with a higher migrant mortality rate, a measure of the danger of crossing observed in the second half of 2017 and early 2018. Very little is known of the conditions in which most of these 20,000 people were returned in 2017, and several thousand more over the first months of 2018. In our report, in addition to the Sea-Watch versus Libyan Coast Guard case, we document a number of other incidents which essentially we only know about in a little bit more detail thanks to the presence of rescue NGOs at sea. The recurrent operational patterns that we document demonstrate the systematic nature of the events, indicating once again a well-defined strategy. Our report thus served as the empirical basis for the legal team to demonstrate that Italy, while refraining from operating direct refoulement on the high sea via pushbacks through its own vessels, after this practice was condemned by the European Court of Human Rights in 2012, Italy has operated a policy of refoulement by proxy through the action of the Libyan Coast Guard. This policy has been implemented in full knowledge of the horrendous conditions that awaited migrants brought back to Libya, which Mario Giro, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, admitted on the 6th of August 2017 to be akin to being brought back to hell. I must tell you to conclude that the hell that migrants have faced was made very palpable for us as researchers in speaking to some of the survivors who were brought back to Libya, some of whom were tortured for several weeks, and so that their family would send ransom to them, to the captors. A few weeks ago, one of the two people we were in touch with and who had remained stuck in Zabrata despite escaping from the hands of his captor, a few weeks ago, we heard from him, and he had arrived safely in Spain. He had been rescued by the Aquarius on the 12th of June 2018, and after Matteo Salvini refused to let the Aquarius disembark in Italy, he was amongst the survivors who were brought to Valencia. Today, if that same person attempted the crossing, not a single rescue NGO would be able to contribute to his rescue. Had he crossed today, he would have faced a far greater risk of renewed interception by the Libyan Coast Guard or of dying in the lethal rescue gap. So once again, I can only underline, as others, that the presence of rescue NGOs is fundamental to save lives as long as the policies of legalization of migrants remain in place and the rescue gap that they have left by their retreat of their own means remains in place. But on the other hand, to document and contest the violations and violence that are exercised in the EU's policies of containment. Thank you very much.